Great question. You started with that wonderful quote, which is from the Pyramid of Fire Codex of the Maya, which is the only accurately translated codex provided by a Mayan wisdom keeper. So I think that quote, among with the others that are so profound from that text, really guide us in understanding what exactly ancient people were speaking about, especially in things like coatl, which, I've understood in my writings and expressed pretty clearly my understanding that it's DNA, and they're referring to directly the effect of the electrification of DNA under the conditions that they're creating with their sacred waters and in the sacred temples. And of course, this corresponds to the crystal skull image, which, has been usurped by Hollywood to suggest all kinds of things and obviously associated with death. But the genuine Mayan teachings really show us that the crystal skull is a metaphor for the crystallization of the water in the human body, and that in fact the quartz skull is a symbol of sacrifice, an internal sacrifice for alcohol and all these toxins that people crave. And it's a sacrifice and a purification process that in the Pyramid of Fire Codex is very explicitly talked about as an internal one that is karmic based and that has nothing to do with the misconception of sacrifice as taken in the modern, Hollywood take of, the ancient traditions were all about heart sacrifice, meaning literal bloodbath. And the skull itself was, related to the skull racks kept by some of the Aztec leaders and whatnot. Certainly this did occur, and for hundreds of years, but I believe this is a reflection, just like we have certainly the evangelical people screaming today for war, and we have so-called Christians in the White House who are, killing, millions of people around the planet in their 4-year sport. And I think that, that whole scenario underlies major shifts that are happening in the consciousness of the planet. And I think certainly we are witnessing things that are unprecedented within histories recorded by Westerners. But certainly the Mayan tradition has recorded events like this in the past, and they clearly tell us that it's the movement of our solar system around the galaxy and our interaction with pulsing waves from the galactic core that dictate where human consciousness lies and how human consciousness interacts on the surface. And there's so many avenues to talk about in that direction. But I think certainly the understandings the Mayans present with us frame that where we can make sense of it. And so, of course, I use that in my work very, very clearly, bringing us back to the ancient wisdom so that we don't default into understandings that Hollywood has given us, but we look towards the original root source.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it is interesting that, obviously, I try to meditate as well. And, I think a big part of that is celibacy. Anyway, let me pass it over to Gemini.
Hi, Alex. How are you this evening?
Doing great, thanks.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Philip Callahan and the Druidic Towers in Ireland?
I have just come into a little bit of awareness of it, but I certainly want to look into it more because it strikes a resonance certainly with what I found in my own research.
Sure. Well, how I came to discover him was that he does a study on bugs and their antennas and how through their antennas that they pick up different frequencies of wavelengths and things of that nature. It's really interesting. But Dr. Callahan had stated that it was fascinating that just above the surface of the ground to about 2 to 4 feet up, there is a null of atmospheric frequencies that get stronger and stronger until at 9 to 15 feet above the surface they are extremely strong. The Irish monks were well aware of this, for that is where they built their high doors. At every tower, they measured that there was a direct correlation between tower door height and the strongest waves. What are your thoughts on the tower's ability to receive cosmic waves and distribute them? Callahan had supposed that they were beneficial for the use of growing crops, amongst other things. And then how do you think this relates to the purpose of the Egyptian pyramids?
Well, that's certainly volumes and volumes can be written about that. I think the towers, the the crystalline makeup of the stones used in the towers and in the pyramids structures worldwide, because they all conform to having high composition of calcite and quartz, and these two crystals are known for their piezoelectric properties, which means that they convert mechanical or acoustic energy into an electrical charge and an electrical field, and that happens through a deformation in the crystal where it's literally a matrix that's vibrating back and forth in unison together. That flexation that happens in the crystals, I believe, is what all of these ancient technologies were using to interact with each other over distances in a solid state way. People look at the pyramids and they are not exactly sure how they may have functioned because they figure there are missing parts. And part of the beauty of my work, I believe, is that there's nothing needing to be added to these structures to explain how they were functioning if certain aspects are understood. For example, an ancient lake was surrounding the pyramids, and there was a solid-state cavitating pump below the pyramids. And so I describe that in my book as in relation to John Cadman's work, I believe. Very fascinating research. So all of these things, basically the design, the solid-state design of all of these temples show that they are part of an array, part of a global system, and their geopositions really confirm that. And so certainly the height of doors on the Irish towers and the height of the chambers inside the pyramids themselves, as well as the Mayan pyramids, those very steep angled stairs, and of course the top, the resonant height of those, the resonant rooms atop those buildings were certainly placed there because the energy does increase with height off of the ground surface. And it's fascinating to see, Tesla's towers were developed using the exact technologies that we see at work in the pyramids, although he used crystalline metals, and copper being the primary one. But he certainly grounded his Wardenclyffe Tower into the earth using water shafts into the water table, and we see the same thing in the Egyptian structures. And in fact, worldwide, we find a connection between limestone beds that have high calcite content and tunnel systems that allow water flow through these. And of course, that's, the cenotes in Mexico and Guatemala, and all the Mayan structures are certainly linked into that bedrock and the aquifer. So I think all of these structures having these commonalities really shows us that the ancients knew something that we are just discovering, and I'm glad to have a piece of that puzzle to share with the world. And I think that certainly the pineal gland in our own brain, in the center of our skull, is receiving focused energy that is moving through the calcium in our skulls. And that focusing really is what allows the changes that occur in consciousness through the development of alignment. And when people speak of chakra alignment, and certainly the Mayans do as well, they have words for chakras. They're called chakla among the Mayan culture. And then their word for kundalini is kuntalini. And these are exactly corresponding words and concepts to the ancient Sanskrit traditions of India. So these direct correlations show us that not only are the technologies identical, but the mandala design and the spiritual understandings of the Kundalini culture is present at all of these sites worldwide as well. And of course, anyone who's interested to see will find that there are Buddhist temples and ancient ones in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Cambodia. These places really have a wealth of structures that look quite similar to the Mayan step pyramids. So it's quite fascinating to keep delving into this avenue of research, and there's so much more to be found underneath the sands of deserts and below the continental shelves, because during the Atlantean times, most people were living at sea level, and that sea level was quite significantly lower than it was by hundreds of feet than the present sea level. So it's an exciting time to be researching these topics.
Yeah, it certainly sounds as though it is. Now, are you familiar with the Hutchison effects, where electromagnetic rays seem to be able to move or levitate objects, burn metal, change the structure of items, store energy in crystals, etc.? And how do you think this technology can be used?
Well, I think actually it's exactly taking advantage of the crystalline properties of the metals that Hutchison would use. he certainly used many different objects, and in fact, other researchers have demonstrated the acoustic levitation of water, as well as animals have been, for example, frog embryos have been gestated from embryo all the way to tadpolehood inside levitation bubble of water. So the amazing experiments that can be seen on YouTube, even just checking out, Hutchinson has some amazing videos out there. They show that the normal laws have quantum effects, which once they're achieved, turn gravity on its head. And you see in his videos certainly thick metal bars just creasing, bending, and breaking in half because of acoustic influences. So certainly the pyramids were the perfection of this technology, and what we're doing is like child's play. And certainly the ancient people who used these their primary instrument was stone, and of course geometrically shaped stones. And then the secondary implement were the metals that were used as electrodes exclusively in the buildings. So I think really part of what I'm really looking forward to in this lifetime, being on the planet at this time, is to just watch and see how ancient structures are coming alive, and to be a part of that myself, and to steward that ancient awareness back into common knowledge among humans, because I think this is freedom. And I think Carlos Castaneda, in his conversations with Don Juan, who was a Yaqui elder from northern Mexico, the Sonoran Desert there, in his talks, Don Juan very explicitly said to him, "We know what we are waiting for. We are waiting for freedom." And I know myself, and I've felt in my spirit for many years now, that this is connected with the changes foreseen with the Mayan calendar and in the different prophecies, like the prophecy of the red sky by Apache elder Stalking Wolf, which I encourage everyone to read in length and think about, because this prophecy, as well as many others, were handed down and published in some cases dozens of years ago in the case of the Apache prophecies in 1920s. And they have already been fulfilled to a startling degree, and there are still yet clues to what has not happened yet that is, according to their track record, most likely to occur. And so when I look at the Mayan track record and ancient knowledge, I find complete corroboration with everything Nikola Tesla was describing and everything that I can discover using modern physics and plasma physics especially, and acoustic physics, of course. So all these things really, for me, are combining to create a wonderful time to witness how, the misuse of Tesla's technologies are falling apart, and those ancient technologies are coming back to life for us. So we get to use these pyramids that have been here idle for so many years unused.
Do you think that the pineal gland in the ancient civilizations was a lot cleaner? It wasn't calcified, so that their ability to use these kind of technologies came easier for them?
Well, I think it has all to do with lifestyle. And of course, many people today are toxified just by their participation in social systems like cities where the water is flowing with chlorine, to toxify their, certainly those things enter. And, the electrification process that I'm speaking about and recommending to people is not compatible with chemical toxification from all of the water systems that we have, which are obviously, flowing with people, with estrogen from birth control pills, as well as drugs people are intaking and letting out into the system. Cocaine, I think, has been measured, and they actually have realized that the amount of cocaine use in countries like Italy is dozens of times higher just by taking estimates of how much is in the wastewater. Uh-huh. So, things like this, the level of toxicity is so absurd in modern people that it's very difficult to look at ancient lifestyles and compare them. And yet we have to. I think there's a necessity to at this time. And when we live and look at ancient technologies for living, and of course the word Ayurveda is an ancient Sanskrit word meaning the art of living or the art of being.